Jack Eichel is almost back to the ice, but Alex Tuck has 3 goals and 7 assists in 9 games. Who would you rather have?
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, hockey heads. Welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Big Flip Livingstone, here with my esteemed co-host, Steele Rodin, and we are fired up for a jam-packed inaugural kickoff episode. Steele, I'm excited to be here, brother, and I'm excited for you to kick off our first daily fantasy segment on our first show.
Yeah, super excited to be here with you, Flip, and just happy to be with the Locked On program. So super excited to get things going. And let's start off with the daily fantasy segment. We only got 5 games on the docket for tonight. And for me, I picked out the 2 biggest matchups in my mind. And I'm going to start off with the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Anaheim Ducks. And the second big game is the Chicago Blackhawks versus the Detroit Red Wings. Obviously, there's the Washington Capitals versus the San Jose Sharks, which could be a really good game. But those 2 games that I just mentioned are the biggest ones for me for daily fantasy teams. The Leafs are 5-2-1 in the last 8 games, while the Ducks are 3-5-0 in the last games. And I think you have to go with the big dogs, Flip, because Matthews and Mitch Marner have just been absolutely incredible in that stretch right there.
Mm-hmm. 2 offensive studs, right? You can never really go wrong when you're thinking daily fantasy with the Leafs. The Anaheim Ducks have been, let's give them their credit, but they're dealing with a lot of key injuries right now. There's guys in quarantine, there's guys battling injury. So whenever you see that and a tasty matchup for Jack Campbell, you can't help but feel that it might be a big night for the Leafs big guns, and I'm feeling you with those picks, Steele.
Yeah, and looking at Mitch Marner, coming back from that injury, he's only played 3 games and he's got 3 goals and 5 points in that stretch. So I wouldn't suggest to go anywhere elsewhere with these players right here. I think you have to stick with those top guys on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then, Jack Campbell as well. Like, it has been a little bit of a tough stretch in that 6-game road trip for the Toronto Maple Leafs and Jack Campbell. They went back and forth with wins and losses, but I think they're super ecstatic to be back at home right now and then get back on the road after that against the Detroit Red Wings in their next game. But yeah, I think you have to go with Jack Campbell. But I wanted to ask you, with how well the Calgary Flames are playing, would you rather go with Jakob Markstrom or Jack Campbell right now for your daily fantasy?
Yeah, you guys can see the flags behind me, and hopefully you'll be along for this ride where I talk a lot of smack about how the Toronto Maple Leafs like to string me along. But, Jack Campbell holds a 3-4 all-time career record against the Ducks, respectable 9-10 save percentage, 2.80 goals against. So he has had some success against the Ducks, right? Playing for the Kings to start his career. He probably had a lot of close, 1-goal Western Conference games with that team. I like the spot of coming home for the Leafs, but also Jakob Markstrom has arguably been, the reason the Calgary Flames are where they are this year. One of them anyway. That's a tough question. Really good one as well. If I have to coin flip it, I'd probably just go with Campbell, knowing that the Leafs are back home in a good spot there. Hopefully not a look-ahead game either. Looking ahead to a team like the Red Wings, you have to think they're focused on the Ducks. So I'd probably lean Campbell, but Markstrom wouldn't be a second bad choice either.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. Obviously Jakob Markstrom just got that big W against the St. Louis Blues on Monday night, that 7-1 win. So he's been absolutely incredible this year. I believe he has like 4 or 5 shutouts on the season already. So he's definitely a top 3 goalie in this season so far. But let's jump over to the second big matchup that I suggested for Wednesday night's games, and that's the Detroit Red Wings versus the Chicago Blackhawks. Both these teams have been a little bit in rough shape in their last stretch. The Blackhawks have lost their last 4 in a row, while the Red Wings have played some decent hockey in the stretch, but they need some help from their goaltending. In those tight games, the goaltending has just not been there, Flip.
Well, yeah, like when I look at that matchup, if it doesn't scream to me to be an over bet, I don't know what it is, but we'll get to that later in the show. This is one of those matchups that maybe you just kind of chuck a hand grenade in it and move on. But you're not wrong about the recent stretch of games for either team. 4-3-3 for the Blackhawks. The Red Wings, 3-4-3. So these are the two kind of like bubble teams, barely good, barely bad. But I don't know. What's your angle with this deal? Who are you feeling?
Well, I think because they've been in such a tough stretch, both of these teams, that it shouldn't be as tight as we've seen before, a little bit more loose, a lot more physical. Obviously, the goalies on both sides have not been up to par. So I think this is the game where you need to pick some of those top guys or even middle guys on both these teams. So I went with a pairing on the top line of Lucas Raymond and Nemestikov. So I think pairing those guys together who have played really well alongside Dylan Larkin can be really good for your daily fantasy. And then even helping on the blue line, a guy like Moritz Seider or Philip Ronek on the blue line. Those guys have been absolute studs for the Red Wings as well, helping them trend in the right direction.
Yeah, most definitely. Moritz Seider, that is a name that you want to probably double and triple circle if you haven't already. Daily fantasy, dynasty league, whatever it is, double circle that kid's name because he is going to be a special one and he's going to be in this league for a very long time. You mentioned a guy like Dylan Larkin. The Red Wings are not exactly stacked up front. We can say that with, fair, solid confidence. But I don't mind the play there with the Nemesnikov pairing. A guy with a lot of offensive upside, but can't seem to really find a fit wherever he was, bouncing around from Tampa to the New York Rangers to now the Red Wings. I know he's been another place in between, but you have to go with those guys. But like maybe you look also at some of the Chicago Blackhawks top guys. I don't know what you're thinking there. I know Taves has been trying to turn back the clock a little bit the last couple of games. Couple of near highlight reel goals and things like that. But I like Dylan Larkin. That would be my pick as well.
I'm not sure if I would go with a guy like Jonathan Taves right now. He just, ever since I understand everything that happened last year with his physical health and, having to come back with having to try and come back and play the style of game that you played before that happened. Like right. We're seeing that with Anders Lee this year, like with the New York Islanders. He has not played even close to what we've seen him play in the past for the New York Islanders. So I would stay away from a guy like Jonathan Taves just because it took him so long to get back in the groove of things, to get back in the game alongside Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat and those guys that he's played with over the last couple of years. So if I were to take anyone from the Chicago Blackhawks, it would have to be Alex DeBrincat because he has been by far their best player. But again, it all depends on what kind of price all of these, star players are up for the night. So for me, that's why, I'm kind of pairing the Toronto Maple Leaf superstar players with those guys on the Detroit Red Wings who shouldn't cost as much. And then again, the goalies always cost so much. So you have to keep in mind how much those goaltenders are going to cost you in a night.
Most definitely. And I think you're onto something here with the, obviously you're grabbing the big money guys with the Leafs, but the Red Wings score in bunches. They're one of those teams that they just, right? They either get pumped by 6 or 7 or they score 6 or 7. So it's boom or bust there. But let's hope with a team like the Blackhawks, like I don't have the overall stats up, but I can almost guarantee they're at the top of the league in goals allowed. At the same time, so are the Red Wings probably. But, if you're setting up the scenario for a boom or bust, let's roll with it with a couple of the Red Wings. And, you can hit us up on Twitter and thank us later. Our handles are under the bar there.
Yeah, and that's why I love the Detroit Red Wings this year because they're absolutely heading in the right direction. Steve Yzerman has done a wonderful job in those acquisitions, in those draft picks, in the prospects that he's gotten. So for me, I absolutely love what Steve Yzerman does. What else I love is Built Bar. And if you're like me, Built Bar is the thing that you need to get right now. If your New Year's resolution is to work out more, eat healthier, and look better, whether it is your resolution or not, Flip, no matter what, you have to get Built Bar for your everyday protein snack. It contains 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. And the best thing about it, it's covered in 100% real chocolate. So for me, that's right up my alley. And if that doesn't appetize you right there, these different flavors will. There's so many different flavors to choose from. There's coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel. I see you drooling over there, Flip. And there's mint brownie. And there's many more. In fact, Built Bar always comes out with new limited time flavors. So check out built.com often to see what's new on their website. And if you go to built.com and use promo code LOCKS15, and you'll get 15% off your order. I'll say that again. If you go to built.com and use promo code LOCKS15, you'll get 15% off your order off at built.com.
Boom. Nailed it. And now I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. The sun is shining and I'm ready to crush a few Built Bars. We're waiting for our free promo. Let's go. Locked on. My doorbell is working. But I'm hungry, and now now that my taste buds are tantalized, why don't we jump into our second segment here, and break down one of the, I would say, more polarizing players over the last at least half a season in Jack Eichel, the Jack Eichel trade, the Jack Eichel situation in general. We were talking about this before the show, Steele, and Jack Eichel still looks like at least a month away. Pete DeBoer said earlier this week that it could even be 2 months. I think Vegas is in one of those situations that they do not need to rush this player back. They are already in the mix as a Stanley Cup contender. Hate it or not, love it or not, that's a fact. They are in the mix. So I think they are really in an advantageous situation here in terms of not having to rush him back. But I really do see this deal as, if we're talking about who would you rather have, Jack Eichel and a third, or Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs, top 10 protected first this year and a second rounder next year. Man, obviously Eichel has not touched the ice, Steele. We know that. Let's not get out of control. The kid has 139 goals and 216 assists in 375 games. He can play. He can score. But the trade is looking pretty good for the Buffalo Sabres right now. And I think, Alex Tuch, big, skilled, can play the power play, can kill penalties, can literally be circulated up and down the lineup. And with 3 goals and 7 assists in 9 games, Tuch is looking like he is very much for real. And sprinkle in the fact that Peyton Krebs now has 3 points, 2 goals, 1 assist in 5 games. Hey, I'm not hating this if you're a Buffalo Sabres fan. I don't know what you think about it all, Steele.
I like the things that Buffalo got in return for Jack Eichel. Obviously, Jack Eichel's a superstar. I think Vegas won this trade no matter what. But sure. I think with the way the Buffalo Sabres have been the last couple of years, this will send them in the right direction, the same kind of way the Detroit Red Wings are trending right now. So for me, I agree with you right there. I think getting Alex Tuch in return, he's been an absolutely incredible asset since he's come back from in that trade, as well as from his injury. He's got 10 points in 9 games, I believe. So he's been absolutely incredible for them. And obviously, Jack Eichel's not back. Like you said, Peter DeBoer believes he's still 1 to 2 months away. But I actually read that Vegas's owner, Bill Foley, believes he's only a couple of weeks away. So it's a little bit wishy-washy on what might actually happen. But I agree with you. I don't think there is any reason to rush Jack Eichel right now, especially with Vegas at the top of the leaderboard in their division. But agreed. The way Alex Tuch has played for the Buffalo Sabres, he's been incredible. And I think with all the young guys they have right now, they're heading in the right direction.
That would be a very owner type thing to say. Come out and be like, no, he's out there in a couple of weeks, so don't worry about it. He'll be out there skating laps. And then the coach comes in and throws a hot or a wet towel on that talk pretty quick. But at the end of the day, I think why we're highlighting the back end of this trade for Buffalo is Krebs and Tuch are players that you might want to be keeping an eye on in a dynasty format. Krebs is probably out there if you want to pick him up and even add him to some sort of minor squad if your format has that. Jack Eichel obviously is most likely owned in your league already, and still with him a couple of months away. Not too much to look at on the fantasy front. But when it comes to a player, especially like Peyton Krebs, who is continuously getting more and more looks night in and night out, up and down that lineup, sure, it's the Sabres lineup, and sure, they don't tout a superstar that it's like you're pairing Krebs with, he's a must-add. But with that said, Alex Tuck, Peyton Krebs, keep your eyes on them because they will continue to get a look there. And, when it comes to deep format fantasy leagues, you got to have your eyes on players like that. Don't you think, Steele?
Yeah, exactly. You have to keep your eyes on guys that are getting the opportunity to show what they can do, especially in a young stud like Peyton Krebs, getting his two first career goals over the weekend. So for me, I completely agree with you, but I think we have to take a look at the Jack Eichel side of things and what this means for the Vegas Golden Knights, their fantasy teams, in all different apps, as well as just the lineups that Vegas is going to potentially have once all of their players are back to healthy.
Yeah.
And for me, obviously looking at, ESPN and Yahoo, Jack Eichel's only rostered at 85% on
That's
Yahoo
surprising.
fantasy leagues.
That's surprising.
And he's only rostered at 55% on ESPN. So that's a guy you have to look at right now to potentially, when's he going to be back? Can I pick him up right now?
Right.
Should I pick him up earlier rather than later because someone else might be looking at him?
Yeah, and he did, let's note here, owner or coach, whoever, he skated in his first practice last week or the week before. He is hitting the ice. It's only a matter of time before he returns. And if you're looking at, a big push for ahead of your playoff situation, your playoff showdown, you want to have a guy like Jack Eichel in the mix, also because Vegas is loaded up front. So it's not like he's going to have to slot in and carry the load. He's going to slot in and play on the top line, play on the top power play unit alongside guys like William Karlsson, Marchessault, Riley Smith. I know Pacioretty's been dealing with injuries, but when he's healthy, Pacioretty's a stud. So, you cannot overlook his impact. I just think this is one of those scenarios that the trade has worked out for both sides. I know it's hard to say because he hasn't played in Vegas yet for Eichel, but for real, they won the trade with the most talented player. But it's one of those scenarios that the trade has kind of worked out for both sides, and that doesn't really happen all that often. And it's something you want to keep an eye on when it comes to your deep fantasy formats, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you said it right there. What is the lineup going to look like when everyone is healthy? Like Mark Stone is out right now with COVID-19.
Mark Stone, that's the other guy I forgot. How could I forget him?
How could you forget Mark Stone? He's one of their best players in the league.
Agreed.
It's but yeah, when you look at the lineup they're going to have when everyone's healthy, their top six forwards might be the best top six forwards across the entire NHL. Like you're looking at Jack Eichel down the middle alongside Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone. That's your first line right there.
Nasty.
And then with your second line, you have Jonathan Marchessault, William Karlsson, and Riley Smith, who have been absolutely studs since they've joined that team.
That's a sneaky good line too.
Sneaky good line.
Sneaky good line. And speedy as well. So Vegas has already proven top to bottom that they're a quality franchise from the first game on the Strip. Robin Leonard in the cage and blue line that features a player like Pietrangelo. You better be in the mix. So I think what you said is spot on. When Eichel comes back, they are going to have all kinds of options up front. And if I was the Western Conference, don't get me started on the East. If I'm the Western Conference, I have my eyes on Jack Eichel's return because you can't also help but feel that kid is hungry to prove that he wasn't just being held back by the players in Buffalo, that he can play with the best of them. And let's see what he can do alongside the talent that you just mentioned.
Well, for me, I honestly believe that Jack Eichel is in the same tier as a guy like Austin Matthews. I don't think that's even far-fetched at all.
I don't think it's far-fetched, Steele. It's not far-fetched. It's just hard to compare when he's sat out so long. But I agree with you. He's a second overall pick. He would have been a first overall pick if he wasn't in Matthews' year. I've always been a big Eichel backer. But let's just leave it at that. Let's see what happens when he comes back. And let's just kind of watch the Vegas Golden Knights take off. But before we take off into our third segment, I just need to let you all know, from football to basketball to hockey, boxing, UFC, you name it, to even your favorite Vegas casino games, do not hesitate to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022 on BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Coming up now, we got to get into our betting segment. You just did an incredible ad for online bets. So let's jump right in to our betting segment.
Let's jump into it. Wednesday night is featuring a little mini 5-game board. I like to call it the amuse-bouche, if you will, to Thursday's loaded slate. Thank you, Steele. I Googled that one before we went on. But I almost like these situations, and my voice cracked. That was weird. I almost like these mini 5-game boards. Sometimes when I see a 12-game Saturday slate, and I almost like my eyes get too big. They're like my belly is not big enough for
a little bit of panic.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's just sprinkle wagers all over and hope for the best. But these smaller schedules give you a little bit more of an opportunity to dig in, do some research, take a look. Right off the bat, we talked about Jack Campbell. We talked about the Ducks and Leafs. I want to dive right back to it because obviously, it is what it is. We're going to talk a lot of Leafs here. But when it comes to betting, the Leafs have the tendency to score a lot of goals. We know this. They have a tendency to also let in a lot of goals when Jack Campbell is not who he is. That's just the nature of the beast with this team. They go up big, they blow big leads, they go back and forth. They're trying to change it. It's a work in progress. But with that said, when I see a team like the Ducks rolling in, who, when you look at their last, I think 8 of 9 games or 7 of 9 games, they've all gone under the number. So stay with me here for a second, Steele. I look at this number. It's sitting at 6 right now. I say tease that up a little bit to 6.5. There's lots of options online wherever you're betting. Go to the alternate point spread. Go to the alternate total. That's where you're going to hear a lot of my picks coming for these bet segments. I love teasers. So what I like in this situation is let's tease that bad boy up to 6.5. And I mentioned Jack Campbell's stats against the Ducks before. The Ducks are facing some key injuries on offense. This game is smelling like an under to me, Steele. You factor in Jack Campbell's 2.80 goals against, which isn't sensational, but it's not bad either, and a 4-4 record. I'm liking the under here. I think this could easily end in a 3-2, even a 4-2 final with an empty net. So my first pick for Wednesday's slate, and you can thank me later, is hammer that under in the Ducks-Toronto game. If you're feeling extra spicy, leave it at that 6. But, when it comes to a team like the Leafs who can sometimes score and allow in bunches, that extra half is making me feel just a little bit more confident. So that's my first pick for Wednesday's board, Steele. What do you think about that?
Yeah, if they were to tease it up to 6.5, I'd have to agree with you right there. But for me, I ended up just staying away from that game for betting purposes altogether. Fair. I just, looking at the money line, there wasn't a lot of money to be made if you were choosing the Maple Leafs. I believe they're at like minus 350 or something like that.
Yeah, no, there's no value.
And like you said, there's so many injuries to the Anaheim Ducks right now up front that I just don't believe they're going to pull out this win against the Maple Leafs Wednesday night. So for me, I ended up just staying away from that game totally.
Mm-hmm. No, hey, and I think there's something to be said about giving our viewers and our listeners that too. If you're not feeling something, that might say something as well, right? Like just because you're not picking something, maybe that means stay away completely. If you can't get a finger on things and you're sitting here every night and you got 2 podcasts running and you're doing this, like I'm going to trust you. And that's what our viewers are going to trust. But if you mess up too many times, I'm out. But I can jump into my second pick that I'm feeling, Steele. You mentioned the money line. You mentioned the money lines in general, not having a ton of value. Speaking of which, let's take a look at this Capitals San Jose game. I did a quick dive. Capitals are minus 176. Fine. But San Jose, we know San Jose is trying to find themselves, trying to identify themselves as a club. Whenever I see a team like that rolling into a situation like Washington, who's basically their cup window is shrinking. And I like them this year to be a dark horse for the cup, but San Jose is 1-7 in their last 8 visits to Washington. They do not play well on the road in general, and they do not play well on the road against Ovi. Sure, it's a heavy favorite. Yes, the value isn't great, but we're also here to feed you winners, and you make your own decision. I could see Washington steamrolling tonight, easily by a goal or two. Hammer them on the money line. If you're feeling spicy, boost up your odds and take them on the puck line minus 1.5. Why not? Make sure you check your starting goalies, but Sharks struggle in Washington. They don't play well on the road overall, and let's just hammer the Caps and move on, shall we?
Flip, I like your logic there, but I am totally disagreeing with you once again.
Let's hear it.
I'm taking the San Jose Sharks on
Side bet
on both. I've already lost the first side bet to you, so we're gonna have to make up from before. But I took the San Jose Sharks on, and I took the San Jose Sharks game under at 5.5 at plus 105. So I believe it's going to be a tighter game than we've seen. The San Jose Sharks are without Erik Karlsson and a couple of other guys, but I believe because they still have their top dogs, Brent Burns, Timo Meier, Tomas Hertl. So I think this is going to be a tighter game than what you've said. Obviously, the stats don't lie. They're terrible on the road, especially against the Washington Capitals. But I'm taking the under at 5.5. I think it's going to be a tighter game. And then I'm also taking the San Jose Sharks money line at plus 160.
Okay.
Both these teams have been very struggling over the last little bit. Like the San Jose Sharks have gone back and forth with wins, losses. And then again, the Washington Capitals have been the exact same way in their last 8 games. And the Washington Capitals have only averaged 3 goals this season, while the San Jose Sharks have averaged just under 2.2 goals this season as well. So I think it's going to be a lot closer than we think. And I do like the goaltenders on both sides, whether it's James Reimer or Aiden Hill in net, or whether it's Vanacek or Samsonov in net for the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, and look, this is what it's all about, brother. I love that you're disagreeing with me here. When it comes to that under, man, is that spicy. But you're not wrong about the value on the Sharks. And guys like Timo Meier, like I have him in a couple of my fantasy leagues, and I'm lucky to, because he's been absolutely beast. He's checking every box when it comes to fantasy, and he's just putting up points. So if he has he's had a 5-goal game just last week. If he puts up another crooked point night like that, one, your under's in trouble, but you'll probably make some juice on your San Jose pick. So I'm feeling it. Let's do it. I got one more pick for all y'all. Chicago at Detroit. We talked about it already. Let's not overthink this one. The number's at 5.5. It could easily be 6. I'm jumping all over that 5.5, and I'm taking the over. I explained a little bit before. Neither of those teams can play defense at all. And even their defensemen seem to have offensive upside, especially in a guy like Moritz Seider, like we talked about. This could easily have a number of 6.6 or 6.5. It's low. I love that situation. What I just said holds true. No one can play defense there. Let's just keep it real simple for my last pick, Steele. Let's pick a winner. Chicago at Detroit, over the number at 5.5. And let's lock that in.
Yeah, I love that pick too. So I've got one back right at you, which is on the over-under as well. But it's not that game. It's the Colorado Avalanche versus the Boston Bruins at over 6 at minus 120. I just think that's a big hit right there. You got absolute studs up front on both of these teams for the Colorado Avalanche and Boston Bruins. And then because of how flaky Darcy Kemper's been this entire season, as well as whether it's Tuukka Rask net, who imploded in his second game back after signing that contract to join the Boston Bruins for the rest of the season. So for me, with all of the talent they have up front on the blue line, and then with both these goaltenders being a little bit flaky, I think you got to hammer hard on the over at 6 for that game of the Avalanche versus the Bruins. What do you think?
I like it. And I watched the game on Saturday. I was watching the Jets-Bruins game, and Rask looked shaky. Mind you, I think that was the first game back. So, maybe he gets a pass on that one. But I also just think what you said about Kemper holds true. He can either not stay healthy or not stay consistent. And I don't think if it wasn't for as good as Colorado is on the blue line and up front, I really do think that Kemper may have been exposed even more than he has already. So, he's good for a couple. Rask looks like he's good for at least a couple of crappers. So yeah, let's finish it on that note. I like that pick, Steele. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, honestly, I liked all of the picks we've had so far, except for your San Jose versus Washington ones.
That's
We'll see
okay.
who wins. We'll see who wins the side bet there. But definitely, if you're tuning in for this podcast, take whichever picks Flip and I just mentioned, whichever one you're feeling that has that gut feeling for you. Thank you so much for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey your first listen every single day. If you want more gambling advice and what you should pick every single day, not just NHL, but across all different sports leagues, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, just like Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Stay tuned for Thursday's episode where Flip and I will discuss some major downfalls in two of the league's most elite franchises. A little tease for you there, Flip. I know you like your teases. And just please make sure you subscribe and follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. And you'll get the latest episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey as soon as it's available each and every day. Thank you so much for tuning into today's podcast with Flip and I. Have a great day, and we shall see you again back here tomorrow.
See you guys.